Hello everyone, welcome to my channel DGL Learning. I am Rajita and I am going to give you the notes of paper 6 at Gender, School and Society. आज से मैं स्टार्ट करने वाली हूँ B.ed सेमेस्टर 4 के नोट्स एज बिकॉज B.ed सेमेस्टर 2 के एग्जाम्स नहीं होंगे. अभी स्कूल इंटर्नशिप चल रहा है. आफ्टर दैट जस्ट प्रैक्टिकल्स ही होंगे और उसके जस्ट बाद आपके B.ed सेमेस्टर 3 के प्रैक्टिकल्स होंगे और स्कूल इंटर्नशिप्स होंगे. ठीक है. मेन जो थ्योरी पेपर्स आई थिंक सो सेमेस्टर 3 भी ये लोग स्किप करने वाले हैं. जहाँ तक अभी तक मैंने सुना है, मुझे अपने सोर्सेस से पता चला है कि ये लोग सेमेस्टर 3 भी स्किप करने वाले हैं. दे आर जस्ट गोइंग टू टेक द एग्जाम्स ऑफ सेमेस्टर 4. ये 20 to 22 वाले बैच के लिए. ठीक है. 20 to 22 बैच वाले लोग बी रेडी. अब आप लोगों का सेमेस्टर 4 काफ़ी जल्दी है क्योंकि आपका B.ed खत्म होने वाला है. सो लेट अस स्टार्ट विथ पेपर 6 दैट इज जेंडर, स्कूल एंड सोसाइटी, यूनिट 1, जेंडर रिलेटेड कॉन्सेप्ट्स. Gender introduction. Gender is a social construct that impacts attitudes, roles, responsibilities, and behavior patterns of boys and girls, men and women in all societies. Increasing attention has been given to the importance of achieving gender equality in education. To date, however, most efforts have focused on addressing gender parity, an equal number or proportion of girls and boys accessing education opportunities. Although simple gender parity may be easier to measure, gender equality encompasses a wider concept of which gender parity is only a part. Gender equality moves beyond access and requires that girls and boys also experience the same level of quality and outcomes of education. One of the key impediments to achieving gender equality in education is that it cannot be addressed in a vacuum. Rather, educational institutions are products of the inequalities that exist in larger society. Educational institutions are shaped by the societal forces that perpetuate gender-based discrimination, yet they can also be essential tools to effect great change throughout a community or social context. Behaviors and beliefs formed in schools and educational institutions can have a lasting impact on gender relations in society. Education systems are both a result of external forces and instrumental to perpetuating or alleviating gender disparity around the world. Next, come to the concept. Gender refers to the roles and responsibilities of men and women that are created in our families, our societies, and our cultures. The concept of gender also includes the expectations held about the characteristics, aptitude, and likely behaviors of both women and men, that is, femininity and masculinity. Gender roles and expectations are learned. They can change over time and they vary within and between cultures. Systems of social differentiation such as political status, class, ethnicity, physical and mental disability, age, and more modify gender roles. The concept of gender is vital because, applied to social analysis, it reveals how women's subordination is socially constructed. As such, the subordination can be changed or ended. It is not biologically predetermined, nor is it fixed forever. It is an overarching variable in the sense that gender can also be applied to all other cross-cutting variables such as race, class, age, ethnic group, etc. Gender systems are established in different socio-cultural contexts which determine what is expected, allowed, and valued in a woman, man, and girl, boy in these specific contexts. Gender roles are learned through socialization processes. They are not fixed but are changeable. Gender systems are institutionalized through education systems, political and economic systems, legislation, and culture and traditions. In utilizing a gender approach, the focus is not on individual women and men, but on the system which determines gender roles, responsibilities, access to and control over resources, and decision-making potentials. The gender concept implies a rejection of the underlying biological distinction in the word sex and in the expression sexual inequality, which appears as an ideological alibi for maintaining domination, the alibi of nature. Women are no more part of nature and no less part of culture than men. grouping together all the differences identified between men and women, be they individual differences in social roles or cultural representations. That is, the grouping together of all that is variable and socially determined. The non homogeneous nature of the category of women, which age transcended by differences of class, ethnicity, and age. The basic asymmetry and hierarchy between both groups, sexes, and genders, one of them dominating and the other dominated, which is the basis of male power. Next is the definition. Gender is defined by FAO as the relations between men and women, both perceptual and material. Gender is not determined biologically as a result of sexual characteristics of either women or men, but is constructed socially. It is a central organizing principle of societies and often governs the processes of production and reproduction, consumption and distribution. FAO 1997. Gender has been defined as the commonly shared expectations and norms within a society about appropriate male and female behavior, characteristics, and roles. Gender can also be considered a social and cultural construct that differentiates females from males and thus defines the ways in which females and males interact with each other. These roles and expectations are learned and they can change over time as well as vary within and between cultures. Next is the difference between sex and gender. The terms sex and gender are closely linked, yet they are not synonyms. Robert Stoller in the 1960s has drawn that distinction between them. He suggested that the word sex be used to refer to the physical difference between men and women, while the term gender be used in connection to the behavior and cultural practices of men and women. Sex. Sex refers to the biological characteristics or natural biological differences between men and women. For example, the differences in the organs related to reproduction. A person's sex is biologically determined as female or male according to certain identifiable physical features which are fixed. Women's marginalization has often been seen as natural and a fact of their biology. Gender. Gender refers to the cultural, social, and constructed differences between the two sexes. It refers to the way society encourages and teaches the two sexes to behave indifferent through socialization. Gender and the hierarchical power relation between women and men based on this are socially constructed and not derived directly from biology. Gender identities and associated expectations of roles and responsibilities are therefore changeable between and within cultures. Differences between sex and gender. First is the definition. Biological or cosmological difference. Here, social, not natural difference. Meaning refers to psychological characteristics, refers social, cultural expectations and actions. Aspect of change, difficult to change the sex when born as male or female. Can be changed since gender identity is determined by society. Aspect of role, throughout history and across cultures, sex differences exist. At different times in history and in different societies, gender roles are different. Aspect of policy, policies respond to sex differences in areas to do with the physical body, and policies can respond to gender stereotype and traditional gender rules. Now comes to the conclusion. Gender is a culture-specific construct. There are significant differences in what women and men can or cannot do in one culture as compared to another. But what is fairly consistent across culture is that there is always a distinct difference between women and men's role, access to productive resources, and decision-making authority. Typically, men are seen as being responsible for the productive activities outside the home, while women. Sexuality is distinct from gender, yet in it will be yet intimately linked to it. It is the social construction of a biological drive, and individual sexuality is defined by whom one has sex with, in what ways, why, under what circumstances, and with what outcomes. It is more than sexual behavior, it is a multidimensional and dynamic concept. The idea that gender difference is socially constructed is a view present in many philosophical and sociological theories about gender. According to this view, society and culture create gender rules, and these rules are prescribed as ideal or appropriate behavior for a person of that specific gender. Some argue that the difference in behavior between men and women are entirely social conventions, whereas others believe that behavior is influenced by biological universal factors to some extent, with social conventions having a major effect on gendered behavior. Now, our next topic is masculinity and femininity. Come to the introduction. The sex or gender differences raises the issues of male female, masculine feminine, male associated with masculinity and female with femininity. With each constructions, the biological differences between men and women get translated into social terms and descriptions. Feminist writers argue that biological differences get heightened through social descriptions of masculinity and femininity. Patterns of differences by gender is seen when the character is either masculine or feminine. For example, pink and blue are gendered color, former regarded as feminine and the latter as masculine. Further, to be strong and tough is masculine, being weak and soft are associated with feminine character. There are several other traits that are categorized as masculine and feminine. Now comes to the concept. Masculinity and femininity are concepts which signify the social outcomes of being male or female. The traits and characteristics which describes men and women give men advantage over women. Masculinity is not valued unless performed by biological male. Hence, the male body is imbued in our culture with certain traits that characterize maleness or masculinity. Hence, the human norms of male supremacy. Similarly, femininity is performed by the biological female. The female body is in our culture is imbued with certain traits that characterize female or femininity. According to Judith Butler, any theorization about gender introduces the notion or idea of performance of gender in terms of masculinity and femininity. The performance of gender becomes involuntary as gender gets internalized through the socialization process within the dominant discourse of patriarchy. Gender is performed at different levels within the family and in the society. We socially enter into our gendered categories of masculine and feminine right from birth. The concepts of masculinity and femininity as need in feminist discourses and writing to explain the differences between men and women. Some argue that these differences are based in their biology, while others reject these arguments and emphasize that the differences are socially constructed. Therefore, the construction of men and masculinity will accrue exclusively to the bodies of male. The construction of women and femininity will occur exclusively to the bodies of females. Okay, now comes to the definition. The term masculinity and femininity refers to traits or characteristics typically associated with being males or female, respectively. Traditionally, masculinity and femininity have been conceptualized as opposite ends of a single dimension, with masculinity at one extreme and femininity at other. By this definition, high masculinity implies the absence of femininity, and vice versa. In other words, people can be classified as either masculine or feminine. Contemporary definitions propose that masculinity and femininity are separate dimensions, allowing for the possibility that individuals may simultaneously possess both masculine and feminine attributes. Now comes to the conclusion. Femininities and masculinities describe gender identities. They describe socio-cultural categories in everyday language. These terms are used differently in biology because femininities and masculinities are gender identities. They are shaped by socio-cultural processes, not biology. Feminities and masculinities are plural and dynamic. They change with culture and with individuals. Now, our next topic is patriarchy. Introduction. Patriarchy is a often used term in everyday conversation. In casual conversation, whether in English or any other language, and term implies male domination, male prejudice against women, or more simply, male power. But simply, the term means the absolute rule of the rather or the eldest male member over his family. Patriarchy is thus the rule of the father over all women in the family and also over younger socially and economically subordinate males. Literally, patriarchy means rule by the male head of a social unit. The patriarch is typically a societal elder who has legitimate power over others in the social unit. However, since the early 20th century, feminist writers have used the term patriarchy as a concept to refer to the social system of masculine domination over women. Patriarchy has been a fundamentally important concept in gender studies. Next comes to the concept. Patriarchy is a social system in which males hold primary power and predominate in roles of political leadership, moral authority, social privilege, and control of property. In the domain of the family, fathers hold authority over the women and children. A patriarchal system is a social system in which the father is the head of the household. This, however, is not confined to the household alone. It can be extended to the entire society where males dominate in all social, political, economical, legal, and cultural roles. For instance, in most patriarchal societies, women were very much confined to the domestic sphere, where they were completely cut off from the realities of the society. Let us take some examples to clarify the way in which patriarchy is evident in our daily life. When a man raises his voice in the course of an argument and insists of his point of view, without letting others, especially women, get to utter a single word, his actions are likely to be described as aggressively patriarchal. Next comes to the definition. A form of social organization in which the father is the supreme authority in the family, clan, or tribe, and descent is reckoned in the male line, with the children belonging to the father's clan or tribe. Or a social system in which power is held by men through cultural and norms and customs that favor men and withhold opportunities from women. Characteristics of patriarchal system. First point is the male dominance. In this system, men have the authority to rule over women. They take all decisions in both society and in their family unit, hold all the positions of and powers and authority, and are considered superior. Next is the male identification. Men are concerned with identification that includes qualities of controls, strength, strong work ethic, and competitiveness. Each of these qualities contributes to male identification in a patriarchal system. Male centeredness. Man will be focus and developer of all events and inventions. Men will be the heroes in all situations, and men will be the center of social engagement, fun, and entertainment. Obsession with control. Men have desire to control all social and family situations and must make all decisions regarding finance and education. Next comes to the conclusion. Patriarchy is a system of relationships, beliefs, and values embedded in political, social, and economic system that structure gender inequality between men and women. Attributes seen as feminine or pertaining to women and undervalued, while attributes regarded as masculine or pertaining to men are privileged. Patriarchal relations structure both the private and public spheres, ensuring that men dominate both. Next comes to the gender bias. Introduction. While the past few decades have seen an improvement in the treatment of females in classroom methods and curricular materials, it would be premature to declare victory and dismiss issues of gender bias. Today, our girls and boys remains the victim of gender stereotypes in text and resource material. They are also victims of unintended behaviors by educators. Often, educators reflect varied expectations for children based on a student's gender, class, race, and ethnicity. Next comes to the concept and meaning. Gender bias is a behavior that shows favoritism towards one gender over another. The term gender bias is often used interchangeably with the term sexism. Sexism is typically defined as the subordination of one sex, usually female, based on the assumed superiority of the other sex, or an ideology that defines female as different from and inferior to males. The term gender bias is more inclusive than the term sexism, as it includes both prejudice and discrimination in its definition. Gender bias is so deeply in the system that the discrimination begins from the time a couple plants a baby. Today, science has advanced so far that it is possible to separate male and female sperm so as to predetermine the sex of a child. Next comes to the reasons of gender bias. First is assumption and traditions, social customs, beliefs and practices, social behavior, lack of awareness of women, economic condition and poverty, illiteracy, patriarchal society, discrimination against girls, and dowry system. This is the point number 9. Okay, dowry system. Next, measures to remove gender bias. Prevention of social assumption and traditions, creating awareness, focus on girls' education, improve educational system, provide equal opportunity, promote gender equality in school, and enforced early marriage and premature pregnancy. Next point is gender parity. Let us see about the gender parity. Gender parity is a statistical measure used to describe ratios between men and women or boys and girls in a given population. Gender parity may refer to the proportionate representation of men and women in a given group, also referred to as sex ratio, or it may mean the ratio between the quantifiable indicators among men against the same indicator among women. The term gender parity and gender inequality are sometimes used interchangeably, but gender parity differs from gender equality in that it is a descriptive measure only and does not involve value judgment or argue for policy changes in the way gender equality does. However, gender parity may be one of the important metrics used to assess the state of gender equality within a group of organization. For a long time, gender parity in education was dominating the discourse and the interventions. It is still commonly believed that gender inequalities in education will be resolved if equal access for boys and girls is provided and if gender disparities in enrollment figures and retention rates are eliminated. Access to schooling is a critical issue that still requires attention. However, a wider approach is necessary, which, for example, includes the learning content of education such as curriculum, textbooks, and teaching learning practices. It is a gradually being recognized that promotion of gender equality in education goes beyond access. To consider achievement of gender parity as a goal to strive at is a rather narrow aspiration. Comes to the conclusion. Education that aims at gender equality faces a number of obstacles and challenges. Girls and women are disadvantaged in numerous ways. Although changes in government policies and implementation of more holistic strategies are needed, there are also minor measures that can be undertaken that, when added together, can contribute to changes in practice in the direction of greater gender equality in education. Notwithstanding all the barriers for egalitarian treatment of girls and women in education, there are many examples of successful projects and programs. Now comes to the gender asymmetry. Asymmetric thus means that women, for instance, do not have the same rights as men, that they are treated unequally in comparison to men, that they are at a disadvantage, discriminated against, and oppressed. Thus, the demand for gender symmetry results from the analysis of gender asymmetry. Authors evidence that gender asymmetry is universal. Cultural ideology that explicitly devalues women, example, roles and tasks of women are devalued, example, women mind the home while the men provide. Social structure arrangement, example, exclude women from contact with the highest power. Example, we can say menstruating women cannot approach wounded men or men preparing for war or wage gap. Symbols indicating women are less valued. Women are polluting during menstruation. Gender symmetry is deeply embedded in the human condition. The cause of gender asymmetry is related to biology but not determined by biology. It is about human consciousness. Women are more confined to the domestic sphere because women are more engaged in reproduction and spend more time with babies. The domestic sphere is more concerned with biology, eating, sleeping, and sex, and then are socializers. Next point is gender identity construction. Gender identity is defined as a personal conception of oneself as male or female, or really both or neither. This concept is intimately related to the concept of gender role, which is defined as outward manifestations or personality that reflect the gender identity. Gender identity is nearly all instances is self-identified as a result of a combination of inherent and extrinsic or environmental factors. Gender role, on the other hand, is manifested within society by observable factors such as behavior and appearance. For example, if a person considers himself a male and is most comfortable referring to his personal gender in masculine terms, then his gender identity is male. However, his gender role is male only if he demonstrates typically male characteristics in behavior, dress, and or mannerisms. Basic gender identity, whether innate or constructed, is generally established in children by the age of 3 and is extremely difficult to modify thereafter. In cases where biological sex was ambiguous at birth and errors in sexing were made, it has been almost impossible to re-establish a conventional gender identity later in childhood or adolescence. Furthermore, a secondary gender identity can be developed over the core identity, as sex associated behaviors may be adopted later in life. Heterosexual or homosexual orientations also develop later. Next comes to the culture. It argued that individual self and identity are socially constructed. We, as individuals living in a society, imagine or construct various social processes or phenomena, as well as our own social identity based on our everyday observations, experiences, and encounters with other individuals in other society. Individuals develop different identities based on their interactions with their fellow beings. The sense of community and fellowship relates closely to the idea of social identity of an individual self. There are strong influences of the community and the people with whom an individual self identities and associates. In that sense, gender as one of the identities of an individual is largely created by her or his social interactions and influenced by the community. The process of social construction of gender identity is closely associated with the culture and institutional arrangements of the society through which it operates. Thus, we can say gender identity is not universal, but culture. So, specific discursive construction and cultural identity is continuously formed. This implies that gender identity is cultural, specific, and socially constructed, which shows variations across time and space. Next comes to the social factors. Social factors which may influence gender identity includes ideas regarding gender roles conveyed by family, authority figures, mass media, and other influential people in a child's life. When children are raised by individuals who adhere to strengthened gender roles, they are more likely to behave in the same way, matching their gender identity with the corresponding stereotypical gender patterns. Language also plays a role. Children, while learning a language, learn to separate masculine and feminine characteristics and subconsciously adjust their own behavior to these predetermined rules. The social learning theory posits that children furthermore develop their gender identity through observing and imitating gender linked behavior and then being rewarded or punished for behaving that way, thus being shaped by the people surrounding them through trying to imitate and follow them. Next comes to home. The information that surrounds the child and which is internalized comes to the child within the family arena through parent child interactions, role modeling, reinforcement or desired behaviors, and parental approval or disapproval. It was hypothesized and proven that parents' behaviors rather than parents' belief regarding gender are better predictors for a child's attitude on gender. It was concluded that a mother's behavior was especially influential on a child's assumption of the child's own gender. For example, mothers who practiced more traditional behaviors around their children resulted in the son displaying fewer stereotypes of male's role while the daughter displayed more stereotypes of the female roles. No correlation was found between a father's behavior and his children's knowledge of stereotypes of their own gender. It was concluded, however, that father who held the belief of equality between the sexes had children, especially sons, who displayed fewer preconceptions their opposites gender. This was the last topic. Now comes to its conclusion. In short, gender identity construction found to be associated with physical structure, physical power, outlook, profession, and cultural practices. Moreover, these different sources found responsible for identity construction such as innate and natural physics, traditions, media of behavior, kind, and so on. All the above mentioned perceptions and practices of child with respect to the gender affect in one way or the other in school's days to day-to-day activities. Gender stereotypes in any level in the family may cause low self-esteem among students in the school. Due to low self-esteem, children may suffer in their learning and achievements. Furthermore, these gendered experiences of home life prevent boys and girls to interact and learn from each other. Thus, these barriers reinforce gender stereotypical thinking and practices rather than opening opportunities for the children to benefit from each other's potential. Okay, so this was the last topic of this unit, that is paper 1, and I hope this notes will be helpful for you. मुझे खुशी है कि अब तक मैंने जितने भी नोट्स आपको प्रोवाइड किए हैं सारे के सारे नोट्स आपके हेल्प हुए हैं, काफ़ी ज़्यादा ही हेल्प हुए हैं, आप लोगों ने मुझे कमेंट करके बताया ही है. बस इसी तरह से मुझे सपोर्ट देते रहिएगा अपना. मैंने 5000 क्रॉस कर लिया. लास्ट वीडियो में मैं आपको बताई थी कि मैं 5000 क्रॉस करने वाली हूँ. I didn't did yet, but अब मैंने 5000 क्रॉस कर लिए. थैंक यू सो मच फॉर योर लव एंड सपोर्ट. ऐसे ही मुझे सपोर्ट करते रहिएगा. और अगर ये वीडियो आपके लिए थोड़ा सा भी हेल्पफुल है देन प्लीज़ लाइक दिस वीडियो एंड सब्सक्राइब माई चैनल. ठीक है, आई होप आपके लिए ये हेल्पफुल हो. कुल्हान यूनिवर्सिटी वाले लोगों के लिए तो ये कंफर्म है कि ये बहुत ही ज़्यादा हेल्पफुल है, बिकॉज काफ़ी अच्छे मार्क्स आपको आ जाएंगे इसमें. 80% यू कैन स्कोर पक्का, आराम से. अगर आप पूरा प्रॉपर्ली करके जाओगे तो, जितना मैं नोट्स दे रही हूँ पूरा प्रॉपर्ली करके जाओगे तो आपको आराम से आ जाएंगे उतने मार्क्स. ठीक है, ऑल द वेरी बेस्ट. अभी तो आपके एग्जाम्स है नहीं, अभी आपके इंटर्नशिप चल रहे हैं, बट आई थिंक सो 3rd के भी इंटर्नशिप ही होंगे, प्रैक्टिकल्स एग्जाम होंगे, देन 4th का तो प्रिपेयर करना स्टार्ट कर दीजिए 4th के लिए. ठीक है, ऑल द वेरी बेस्ट फॉर एग्जाम्स एंड थैंक यू फॉर वॉचिंग.